So the COVID-19 pandemic raised a lot of questions, and we knew that health inequalities, for example, or social inequalities were being exacerbated. And so we wanted to understand, because we knew that countries needed to know what was going on, who was being affected, and they needed to be able to rapidly respond to the pandemic. We decided to do a study. We decided to look at what kind of research or the volume of research that's being produced on health inequalities and COVID-19. We wanted to understand which countries were producing research on this topic, what kind of collaborations were being involved, and what world regions were developing research on this topic. And we wanted to study the emerging research field on COVID-19 and health inequalities to understand which countries might have had the capacity to respond. So we decided to analyse the global scientific production of COVID-19 and health inequalities. Between early 2020 and sort of mid-2021, we found at least 9,500 publications have been produced and on the topic of COVID-19 and health inequalities, and that 140 countries had contributed to the research field, so they'd contributed to at least one paper on this topic. We identified a number of inequalities, so these systematic differences that emerged in the research field by countries, by world regions, by income group as well. We also found that this research field was highly collaborative, so it was so a lot of countries were collaborating together on this research field. So new clusters of research groups were developing globally. And in terms of world regions, we identified North America, for example, had produced the most. The North American region had produced the most research in this field at that time, followed by European countries and Central Asian countries. And then surprisingly after that was the Middle Eastern and North African region. And I say surprisingly because prior to the pandemic, they had produced significantly less research on the topic of health inequalities. And so something happened during a pandemic or prior to the pandemic that really seemed to strengthen their capacity to be able to produce research on health inequalities and COVID. And they were conducting more collaborations, we found, with Anglo-Saxon countries. Another research cluster that had formed was in Latin America, by a number of countries within Latin America. And then also there was the European countries, with Chile actually collaborating with that research group rather than with several other Latin American countries. In terms of future research that can be done, so this kind of type of research needs to be updated regularly. So we conducted this analysis in 2021. We also need to do more in-depth research into why and how we identified these trends in research production, global scientific production on COVID-19 and inequalities. So why some countries are collaborating more than others, why some countries are producing more research on this topic than others, and specifically going into depth into the contextual factors. What contextual factors have been important, the economic, social, political factors, and what kind of mechanisms have been involved as well to help to facilitate or inhibit this type of research that's being produced.